Hey everyone, welcome to Bible Discoveries, the weekend show. We're reading through the Bible this year. You know the drill. If you're reading through the Bible with us, this is the place where we come to discuss issues that have popped up as we're reading through the scripture. And we also highlight your comments and your questions, and we use them to start discussions. So thank you so much for being active in the comment section. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your emails, and those of you who write in, really, really appreciate it. If this is your first time here, my name is Corie, and I'm joined by Matlock, my husband. Hey.
What's going on?
Oh, you know, same old, going through the Bible. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good, yeah.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
Like jump into Joshua and Judges today?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. If there's a time to do it, this is the time to do it.
This is actually literally the week.
That's right.
That we were in. It's Judges, really. Judges to Samuel.
That's right. Yeah, and you got Ruth. So you were supposed to read, if I haven't already said it already, Judges 4 to 1 Samuel 4. Mm-hmm. And that includes the book of Ruth, which is right between there.
Yeah, and she's in the time period of the Judges. So
that's right.
I always just
Now, we don't have any questions with Ruth. Generally, there's not too many questions. I think last year we had one about the Kinsman Redeemer. But this year, it's kind of like, okay, no questions.
I have questions.
You have questions.
Personal questions, but that's a different show.
That is a different show.
This is about your questions.
That's right.
Not about my questions.
That's true. You could pretend to be a viewer and submit the question so you can answer it.
Ooh, that's not a bad idea, Matlock. You've given me thoughts. You've given me context.
So let's start off with the first question, which is not a viewer question. It's just a Bible question.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. So why is Gideon referred to as Jerubbaal?
I love that he's referred to as Jerubbaal.
I
wish that we called him Jerubbaal, all the time instead of Gideon. But the Bible doesn't either, so it goes back and forth between Jerubbaal and Gideon, his given name, okay. But Jerubbaal means let Baal contend, which I was going to just read it for you. I'm sure you've read it. If you've done your reading, you've done it. But I love this when, so God tells Gideon to go tear down the Baal idols of his father.
Right.
Big deal. This is a big rebellion. And I love that Gideon does it by cover of night. Yes, Gideon. Like, I feel like this is all of us where we're, do we have to do this in the day? People are going to try to stop me. It's embarrassing. All of these things, right? Life or death is on the line. Gideon. So he destroys the altar of Baal by night. Fair enough. And then the men of the town rally because it's a big deal, right? So if you destroy the altar of a god, that's going out of favor with that god. So the idea is then that god is going to punish not just the person who did it, but the whole area, right? So the men in Judges 6, verse 29, the men of the town, and they said to one another, who has done this thing? And after they had searched and inquired, so one of Gideon's servants spilled the beans. Right. They said, Gideon, the son of Joash, has done this thing. Then the men of the town said to Joash, bring out your son that he may die, for he has broken down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah beside it. But Joash said to all who stood against him, will you contend for Baal, or will you save him? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been broken down. Therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, that is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he broke down his altar. So his dad basically says, all right, let's make this a test.
Right.
If Gideon survives and isn't smote, then Baal is not stronger than Yahweh, because Gideon is saying that Yahweh told him to do this.
Right.
And we'll see. So he was called Jerubbaal. He was renamed by his dad, and that was like his name, where if people wanted to destroy him for this crime.
Right. I was reading something somewhere because I saw this question, and I knew it was for you, but I was reading, someone else responded to it, and I'm not going to say who because it's kind of remarkable. But they say that he transforms into Jerubbaal in this answer. And I was kind of like...
what does that mean?
Like Bruce Banner transforms to the Incredible Hulk? Like what? Yeah.
Is that the Incredible Hulk's name? Bruce Banner?
Oh, there we go. So yes.
What?
Yeah. So there you go. You've learned something.
He is the Hulk, right?
He is the Hulk,
See, and such is my case that we should call Gideon Jerubbaal.
Anyways.
It's cooler.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's pretty cool.
But I guess he's called Gideon because Baal didn't contend. Therefore, Gideon.
Right.
Because the test was over. He didn't die.
Right. Nor did he transform. That's what I want to say.
He didn't like transfigure into let Baal contend.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, fair enough.
It was very strange language.
Were they saying he transformed in that like he went from worshiping Baal to tearing down the Baal altar?
The fact that it said that he transformed to Jerubbaal. Yeah, I know.
That's all I can see now is the Incredible Hulk just...
I really want to say who it is, but I'm not going to.
And you know what? You'd have to be pretty strong to tear down Baal altar. But he didn't do it alone, right? He used his servants. Hence why someone spilled beans. Someone was like, don't beat me up. It was Gideon.
Yeah. All right. That was a good answer. Warm-up's over. Let's get to...
Okay, that was our stretching question.
That's right. We should actually have stretching questions.
We should, just to get us in the groove.
Yeah. I feel like last week, everything was a stretching question for me. I was like, I couldn't get in the groove.
This one has transformed my view of Gideon now.
Yeah.
Jerubbaal! Like forever. Yeah. Forever. Okay.
All right. Judges 14, Corie.
Okay.
Because of your question from Matthew. I don't understand. I keep hearing pastors say that Samson broke the Nazarite vow by killing a lion and eating the honey out of its carcass. Where does it say in number 6 that he broke his vow by doing such? I thought you could sacrifice and so kill animals in a Nazarite vow. But he did kill people, Philistines, and that meant he should have shaved his head. But he was supposed to deliver Israel from the Philistines by killing them. And he needed his strength to do the task, which was from his uncut hair. Little confused, going in circles. Any insight would be appreciated.
Yes, Matthew. Yes. I too am frustrated. I too feel the burden of number 6 not matching Judges 14. Okay. So, but it's not out of nowhere that pastors are saying that this would have gone against the Nazarite vow of Samson in theory. So number 6 just talks about stipulations related to hair and food and drink. So nothing from the vine, nothing that, so the vine, wine, grapes, these are not bad things. These are celebratory things in the grand scheme of Israel. They're supposed to be celebratory things. They also have some implications towards judgment if you sin. So like the enemies are drunk and on the wine of God and things like this. Okay, but.
What about blueberries?
Fine.
Fine?
Fine.
Okay.
Just not the vine, specifically. The bush, but not the vine.
Yeah,
okay.
Right,
You can eat the shrubs, but don't eat of the vine if you're a Nazarite. And also not making yourself clean with a unclean with a dead body. So these are adding. Okay, hold on. Number 6 for the Nazarite adds onto the regular clean and unclean laws of Israel. So remember that Israel as a nation was already under the laws of clean and unclean, this ritual concept of what made you holy and unholy, not sinful and not sinful and without sin, but what made you ritually impure, so less godlike and more human-like. Okay. So the Nazarite vows were just added, it made it more strict, is what I'm trying to say. So the concept is that if a Nazarite is a more strict version of the clean and unclean laws, then the Nazarite would still have to follow the clean and unclean laws of the average Israelite. So because number 6 is an addition, it presupposes that they're also following the clean and unclean laws of Israel. And here lies the rub. Because if we go back to Leviticus chapter 11, that gives us the clean and unclean animal rules. In verse 27 and 28, Leviticus 11 says this: And all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and he who carries their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. So the fact that Samson killed a lion, not that big of a deal, because according to Numbers 6, this didn't necessarily mean that he had to break his Nazarite vow, but he did have to go through the cleansing ritual of being unclean until evening, hypothetically, okay? Because number 6, the Nazarite vow is presupposing also that you are following these regular everyday Israelite unclean and clean laws. But then not only does Samson not do that, but then he eats honey from the carcass of an unclean animal. You could eat honey, but you couldn't eat it from the carcass of an unclean animal. That was an unclean thing to do. So he ingests this impurity and does it to his parents, making them unawares that they are ritually unclean and they do not go through the cleansing process, nor does Samson. Instead, he goes on to a wedding feast of a wedding that he shouldn't even be doing because that wedding is unlawful for him because he's marrying a Philistine woman who has not converted to the worship of Yahweh. And the word for feast that's used, it's been noted in Judges, the word for feast there is a word that emphasizes, apparently, the alcohol in the feast. So while it's not said that Samson partook of alcohol, it's entirely possible that he did. It doesn't say that he didn't, that he abstained. So it's really just showing how bad of a Nazarite Samson is. So that's why pastors say that Samson broke his Nazarite vow by eating honey from the carcass of the lion. It wasn't necessarily the killing of the lion, because that would be strange, right? Because the Holy Spirit comes upon Samson, giving him power to overcome the lion and thereby kill it. Which would just necessitate that he go through a cleansing ritual. But he goes on and eats. So he doubles down on the uncleanliness and gives it to other people as well. Makes a riddle
out of it. Triples down.
He triples down, makes a riddle at his unlawful wedding feast where he may or may not have been consuming alcohol, which was illegal for a Nazarite,
yes.
Right? Goes against the Nazarite vow. So all of these bad things. So it's the concept. Yes, it doesn't go against number 6, but number 6 presupposes that as an Israelite, he's also following the ritual purity laws of Leviticus, which he's clearly not doing. Yeah. I hope that helps.
No, I think that's
good. Does that
good.
make sense?
I think it's perfect sense. I think what helps, it's helpful, so you already established, was the Nazarite vow is on top of everything else the law has. It's not like it's a separate thing where you have the Nazarite vow, then you have the law.
Yes.
Right. So once you look at it through the lens of the law, then you can see, oh, okay, well, he's not doing things, right? Because Nazarite vow is simply an intensification of your lifestyle.
Yes.
Right, through the lens of the law.
It's a special time of being extra strict.
Right.
As a time of dedication for God.
Right.
And so how then, another part of Matthew's question was how then could he have lawfully killed Philistines while still remaining a Nazarite? Well, he probably, after killing Philistines, should have shaved his head, done the offerings, and started again.
Right.
But he doesn't do this.
No.
Because he's Samson, the naughty Nazarite.
the naughty Nazarite?
The Nazarite that God still uses to accomplish his purposes, but ends very poorly. And we get all of this foreshadowing that it's going to end very, very poorly for Samson, which of course it does, because he's not actually following God's leading. He's kind of forcing the Holy Spirit to come upon him and kind of use him more like an animal, if we can use those terms, like more like God had to empower Balaam's donkey. This is kind of the argument that I would go for.
Okay.
Yes, and I mean, when you get into the prophets, they talk about don't be like a horse or a donkey that needs to be ridden with a bit and a bridle, but instead willingly go towards your creator. Kind of see this bit and bridle going on with Samson.
Right.
Which is sad. Okay, Matlock, that brings us to the deeper meaning of the story of Samson.
Okay.
And I want to ask you that. What is the deeper meaning of the story of Samson?
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know.
I don't know.
No, I'm just joking. No,
I don't know.
I think that when you address these, when you talk about the meaning of Samson and stuff like that, his life is characteristic and typified, I think, as a microcosm of Israel, personally.
Yeah.
So I think that if you could look at Samson as like a prophetic indication, it's not the right word, prophetic type of Israel. And what do we mean by that? Well, I think that if you just look at even prophetically where Israel's going in the New Covenant as well, but the future of Israel, and just look at Israel in general, Samson, obviously himself as a person, was a deliverer of Israel, right? But he was given incredible strength. And I think that's really important. Whenever you see something supernatural happening in the text, it's not just for the sake of having a miracle. These miracles point to something. And you think about the supernatural strength that was given to Israel to become a nation. And that strength then is abused through idolatry, which is synonymous with adultery, which is synonymous with sleeping with prostitutes and all these other things. Basically unfaithfulness to your vows, unfaithfulness to your oaths. And so he pretty much, you could say, typifies and characterizes Israel and its future and where it's going. Yeah. You see this happening in the Kings, right? Where they just start committing idolatry and therefore adultery with foreign gods. And this gets them into incredible trouble because eventually then, they get captured, they get defeated, and that's what happens to Samson.
Yeah.
He gets captured. But what's really interesting here is that Samson repents right after he gets his eyes gouged out, and he's given one last feat of strength. And that's essentially what you see happening to Israel. Israel repents when they're captured, and they're given one last bit of strength right before Christ
comes. And the question
comes.
is, what are you going to do with it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, what are you going to do with it? Because to your point about Samson being kind of a microcosm of Israel, this happens a lot with the leaders of Israel, which I think is so interesting that the authors of the scripture bring this out for us, bring out this concept of God showing that and exposing that through people. So we see Samson being called from birth. He's called from birth. He already has a purpose before he's born to be this mighty man of God and to be able to and to begin to free Israel from her enemies. But through his repeated disobedience, where does it get him? Rather than full sail repenting and following God, he uses that repentance and that final shred of strength to, yes, he accomplishes a purpose of beginning to defeat the Philistines for Israel. Right. But not only does he die like an enemy of Israel, he dies with the enemy of Israel. He receives the same punishment.
Yes.
Which is death in a temple of Dagon.
Yes.
And that is very sad.
Yeah.
That is a very, very sad thing. So it becomes this cautionary tale of, look, God's purposes are going to be accomplished.
Right.
But your choices within the accomplishment of the purpose of God really make a difference for your final outcome. Yeah. And we see Israel stuck in this pattern of judges. They're stuck in this repeated pattern of sin, and it's really bad. It's really, really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, because again, Samson obviously is the character they speak about most of all the judges, right? His life is pretty much like a pattern for how Israel's acting. There's ups, there's downs, right? There's wins, there's losses, and all these things. And it's all because of
there's a call to be clean and yet a refusal. Right.
And I think it's interesting, too, that he's kind of like, he's not the last judge, of course, but the way they write him in Judges is almost as if he's like the last judge. It's interesting that he's like the last hurrah, you could say. Now, obviously, Samuel's a judge. Samuel even appointed his kids to be judged, but they were evil. Eli, right? They were all evil.
Yep.
But obviously the judges after that. But the way the story is written specifically is to have him be like the typification, the prophetic pattern of how Israel's acting. And I'd say that there's, again, when you look at how these typologies work, I think Samson best suits that. I don't think you can create, or even, I don't think there's evidence that that there's, Samson's. I've heard people try to argue like a Christ, like a kind of Christ. It's like, well, no,
it's a really bad
maybe
one.
Church. You can argue church. Yeah, I wouldn't argue Christ. Yeah, I think it's a really bad example.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, but besides that, yeah, I think Israel, Samson as a parallel with Israel makes a lot of sense. And
well, it's a repeated pattern. You're going to see it again with Saul. I think is the next one that you're going to see.
Yes,
King Saul becomes a very clear, I think, pattern of Israel, and his end is very similar to Samson's end, where he dies like an enemy of Israel.
Yeah,
with the enemies of Israel. Very sad.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Corie, let's just move on.
Sure.
Judges 18 and Revelation 7. Bizarre combo. It's from PJ. Revelation 7 says that the 144,000 are sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. However, this list excludes the tribe of Dan. Could the wickedness of the Danites in Judges 18 be a reason why?
Okay. So I am not an expert on Revelation. Short answer, yes, it could be a reason, right? Because in Judges chapter 18, we see it tells us that the tribe of Dan takes Moses' grandson as their idolatrous priest, and they have their own pet religion that exists alongside the main religion of Israel for Israel's entirety. That's what Judges claims here.
Right.
At least until the captivity of the land. Here, Judges 18 verse 30. And the people of Dan set up the carved images for themselves, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So the captivity of northern Israel by Assyria. So they set up Micah's carved image that he had made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. So they've got this pet religion is not the term that I want to use, but they have this competing cult system to the true worship of God that's going on at Shiloh with the tent tabernacle, and later at it moves around a little bit before it finally lands in Jerusalem. So yes, this idolatry of Dan could be a reason for the exclusion in Revelation 7. But remember that Dan is not the only one that's excluded from the list here. So this isn't just a carbon copy list of the sons of Israel, meaning Jacob. There's something else that's going on because, for example, Joseph is mentioned instead of Ephraim, right? Because remember, Ephraim and Manasseh are sons of Joseph. And Ephraim and Manasseh, so Joseph got a double portion, so he became 2 tribes instead of 1 tribe. But rather than listing Ephraim, Revelation lists Joseph and Manasseh instead of Ephraim and Manasseh. And there's a few other switches here too, which is really interesting. Like Levi is mentioned, where Levi didn't get a land grant in Israel. So when you're looking at lists in Joshua, for example, Levi is excluded from, you're not going to go onto a map of ancient Israel, like the tribes of Israel, and see Levi as a chunk of land because the Levites didn't get a portion in the land.
Right.
So it's not like a 1-for-1 land. There's something else going on in Revelation. So short answer, yes, Dan may be excluded from the list in Revelation because of their longstanding idolatry. But there's theological reasons, I think, as well that the list in Revelation is different.
I've heard through the grapevine, and this is all hearsay because I don't have any sources for this. But
oh, good.
that some have speculated that the Antichrist was supposed to come out of the tribe of Dan. And I know, it's like, okay, well, what do you make with that? But
I don't know.
The Danites were apparently evil during the Second Temple period. So they were considered evil, I should say. Anyways.
I mean, they were considered evil in the First Temple period.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, not, I'm sure.
I know what you're saying.
Man, I'm trying to think, are there cases of good guys, like highlighted good guys from Dan in like the time period of the kings? And I want to say yes, but I can't point to it. Oh, that's going to be I'm going to do that later.
All right.
I'm going to go through and see all the different mentions of Dan? Because I'm not sure. I haven't actually done that. This question hasn't really haunted my mind yet, but now it shall haunt my mind until I track it down. Thank you, PJ. I'll let you know what I come across in the comment section as I do this, because I am going to go through and see what I can find about mentions of Dan. Fun.
Very fun.
A new rabbit trail to kind of go down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, rabbit hole, you could say.
Yeah.
It could be a trail or it could be a hole.
Rabbits make trails. Rabbit makes holes. They make lots of things.
Yeah, that's fair. All right.
Okay, I'm just going to pass this off to you unless you have something else that you want to add.
No, I'm done. No, I'm good.
Okay, Matlock.
Sure.
Judges 18, Deuteronomy 10.
Okay.
These are the referencing scriptures. Corie Ritchie asks, Deuteronomy 10 verse 9, does this mean Levites have automatic salvation?
All right, let's just read. 10 verse 9. Okay. Therefore, Levi, you already mentioned this, has no portion or inheritance with his brothers. The Lord is his inheritance, as the Lord your God said to him. Basically, like you said, he does not have any land allotment. He does not have his own, everyone else has lands, right? Land distribution. He does not. The Lord is his inheritance. So does that mean that Levites have automatic salvation? Okay, well, I don't think anyone gets quote unquote automatic salvation. Just for the sake of like biological, like when we say automatic, do we mean all Levites are biologically in? We just read, obviously, in Judges 18 that there's a Levite who's very evil. Yeah. So
a whole family of them, because it says his sons after him were idolatrous priests, and they're from the tribe of Levi.
Yeah, so why doesn't Moses' kid get, granted it automatically? So I would avoid the word automatic. I would say the Levites here, the Lord is the Levites' inheritance, so long as they serve him.
Yeah.
Period. If they serve him, then the Lord is in their inheritance, and then consequently salvation.
Yeah.
If they don't, then not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that simple. But yeah, go ahead.
Definitely. And when it talks about the Lord as their inheritance, they did get physical blessings that came with being priests, right? So they did get priestly cities and the land surrounding the cities for their flocks and things like that, of that nature. But also they got to eat, they got the offerings of Israel.
Right.
So the different grain offerings and drink offerings and meat offerings belonged to them. So they profited essentially off of the offerings and sacrifices of Israel that were made, and the different fellowship offerings and things like that.
Right.
So they didn't have land that they were working like the other tribes, but their work in the temple and the tabernacle was supposed to still have a physical blessing attached to it, but just a different kind. So there was like an actual physical inheritance.
Yes.
So the inheritance that is talked about there doesn't mean salvation. It means like an actual physical thing. Like they're what God is giving them.
Right.
As a blessing.
Yes. And then also like within the temple itself. So of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I think that's good. I think that answers the question.
Next question, Matlock. Yeah. Why did Moses appoint judges instead of kings?
Right. Okay. So it's a good question. Why didn't Moses just let his heir become king? I don't know why they did it off the cuff this way.
Well, he really appointed a leader, didn't he? Like Joshua was the next leader. He wasn't like a judge.
So yeah, because the judges specifically is critocracy, which is a fun word we just learned.
Yeah, I never heard that word before.
Critocracy just simply is a rule of judges. So it's specifically for judges in the Bible, right? Suppose they're a monarchy. Crit meaning judge.
There you go.
There you go. Monarch
words.
Being crown. That's right.
Words.
So anyways, let's talk about Deuteronomy 17 refers, Moses talks about this. So why did they start off with this? Well, first of all, it wasn't like a bad thing that they had kings coming on, right? So I'll start at verse 14. When you come to the land that your God is giving you, and you possess it, and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as a king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. So, long story short, God chooses the king, and it's permitted. it wasn't like a bad thing to choose a king. So God's not even against the idea of monarchy. I know some people say that, or the idea of critocracy is the word we just learned. Mm-hmm. He's not against either of those. This is just one method versus another method. So I think there's just a difference between the two. Why he didn't start off with the kingship was because I think that he's trying to establish Israel as a nation in the patriarchal system that has the 12 sons of Jacob established, as opposed to it being one, all Israel, right? You have the 12 brothers, and there was promises along the way and inheritances. So God's keeping promises that he made towards Jacob's children and towards Jacob and towards Abraham and Isaac. He's keeping those promises along the way. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in Deuteronomy 17, earlier, with that appointment of judges, I think I took the question the wrong way, because I just assumed it meant, like, why didn't Moses, like, appoint a king after himself?
Right. Yeah.
But he did prescribe judges.
Right.
Right. So and we see that in Deuteronomy 17, where it talks about, when he's dead and gone and Israel's in the land, what do they do about their legal issues and their interpersonal issues and intertribal issues? We'll take it to the judge, right? So there was a legal system of Israel, and it involved both the Levitical priests and a system of judges, which was around when they were in the wilderness wandering period as well. Moses was the judge, and then there was a bunch of other elder judges that existed. And we see this in the judges. I mean, we see when Deborah judged Israel. We see when a lot of the judges in the time period of the judges become de facto military leaders.
Right.
But the initial purpose of a judge was literally deciding between legal cases. And I think the closest that we see to that, because she was a woman, is Deborah. So she was supposed to just be a judge, but then she gets dragged into the military, even though she's like, this isn't my place.
Right.
Right? Because she calls Barak and she says, God wants you to do this. And he goes, not without you.
Right.
And so then she's forced to go into this military role, where some of the men judges were able to do both, because it just a strength thing, right? It's a military thing. Okay. But when you look at Deuteronomy 17, we do see earlier, right before the kings, it talking about what to do when you have a case against another person, whether it's about legal rights or assaults or in towns that is too difficult for you. So there's this idea of town eldership can handle. Each town is going to have a board of elders and judges that you can go to get your case decided. But if they're not sure what to do, then it goes up in the court system, right? And ultimately it can go to one high judge and the Levitical priests. You can read about that in Deuteronomy chapter 17. So that's just how society was structured.
Yeah.
That's just how it worked.
Why was it structured that way and not another way?
That's just the way society worked in that time period as well, right?
Yes.
Like that's the way they were familiar with doing things.
Right.
And it seems like a pretty practical one as well.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. But there did come a time where Israel thought that a king would be more practical, which Deuteronomy 17, which you've already read, knows that that's going to happen. It presupposes, like, you're going to get into a time of warfare that's really, really complicated, and you're going to want a king to centralize your government.
Right. And I think that there's something really interesting too here, because Christ created God created the what Abraham's land shall be, and he marked it. Remember, he marked it. And with that, the tribes, if you think of just like kind of like strategically, if you just have all the tribes like blend together and you don't, right, you're willing to give up territory. But if you allot tribes to specific places, they're prescribed here, it's harder to give up that territory because that's their zone. They're all Israel connected, but they have specific zones that they don't want to give up because that's their inheritance. As opposed to them all, let's say it's run by a king and it's just all collectively Israel and there's no tribes at all. Okay, if an army comes, okay, well, you can have that portion, right? It becomes easier to divvy up. So I think that it preserves the promise that it's given to Abraham by doing that in one sense. But anyways, besides that, I think that in judges, I think for that specific system were like, again, it didn't have to be evil. Like, the judges didn't have to be like a bad system.
Absolutely.
And I know because the book of Judges kind of paints it as such in a way, because it says, in those days there was no king. And everyone did what was right in their own eyes.
Yeah.
So,
because it's this concept that they all descended into sin and there was no godly, brotherly cooperation.
Right.
And so there was a lack of a centralized government. There was a lack of someone standing up and going, all right, we got to do this consistently.
Right.
Right. So this idea that judges would pop up, different judges would pop up in different areas. Sometimes even like it's potential that a lot of these judges actually were judging at the same time, but just in different areas of Israel, which is a difficult thing. Being the small landmass that Israel is, and such a competitive territory, in meaning that like it's a good idea for Egypt to control this. It's a good idea for Assyria to control this because it's a trade route.
Right.
So whoever controls that controls main trade routes through the Middle East. So it's a very competitive territory, which is why I think you see so much warfare going on in the ancient world. And because the tribes had descended into sin, so much they were very ineffective.
Right.
I think that's why you see judges saying things like, the book of Judges saying things like, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Right.
So a king was hypothetically, theoretically supposed to pull the country up by its bootstraps and make everyone work together. Sometimes that worked. Most of the time it didn't. Because humans, right?
Human nature, that's right. All right. Well, I didn't really have much more to add to that. So I think that's good. Corie,
are we done?
I think we're done.
I think we're done too. Okay, let us know what you think about the system of judges, about the system of kings. If you have any more questions pertaining to Judges, to Samuel, pop them in the comment section down below. Let us know what you thought about the reading this week, whether you found it easy reading or difficult reading. What do you think about Gideon? What do you think about Samson? These are specifics that I am curious to know. All right, until next week, happy reading and studying. Thank you so much for watching. We want to keep producing high-quality biblical content, but we can't do it without your support. If you feel called to support us, please click the link in the description under Donate. Your support really means a lot to us.